what is the visceral reaction you have when I say to you, sit for a while in silence? How does that how does that resonate with you? Do you have some sort of anxiety when you think about sitting in silence where there's no distractions, there's no YouTube on, or you don't have anything on your mobile device that's spitting images at you or any noise? How does that come across to you? Hi, I'm Eric Miller. I posted an article today on Substack. I'm going to read in a little bit, read it to you, that I think raises different responses when I talk about this with men I sit with in spiritual direction and spiritual coaching. They have had experiences where silence was used against them. It was maybe a parental figure when they were growing up who had used silence as a timeout mechanism for behavior modification. Or maybe the silence that you've experienced in the past was very uncomfortable because sitting with your emotions, sitting with yourself in silence brought up images or thoughts that weren't comfortable or were, quite painful. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more towards the end of the article I read to you. But if you've gone through trauma in your life and silence is something you want to avoid because the monkey mind takes over and you have some re-traumatize yourself in the silence, I would encourage you to seek out therapy before trying this, doing meditation, silent meditations, or just sitting in the quiet. Do that. Make sure that you're not triggering yourself and re-traumatizing yourself. So having said that, barring any past traumas you need to work through, silence is something that can really be recharging. It can declutter your mind, taking time away. I have to say that when I'm on my mountain bike out in the woods here in Michigan or in Arizona in the desert, I communicate with God in that way. I have a lot of things that pop into mind. Could be from the Holy Spirit, also could be my subconscious mind, a lot of different thoughts about that. But I definitely am inspired during a ride and then shortly thereafter too. It's the endorphins, the dopamine, the things that the feel-good chemicals that are released when you exercise. That's part of it, certainly. But also being quiet and just being in nature is a huge thing that helps recharge me. So I won't deny, I'll admit to you that, silence has been something in sitting in silence. It was a challenge for me. I've been doing it now for over 10 years, and I can do up to 40 minutes-ish, but typically 20 minutes at a time is what I do, a 20-minute sit to help me to decompress, declutter, quiet the monkey mind. And it is really something that I've grown to love and look forward to whenever I do it. It can be difficult though. Don't get me wrong here, but certainly it is something that when I do it, it is a fantastic experience after the fact. I feel much, much better. So I'm going to jump into this article, and the article will be on Substack. I'll put that link in the description of this video. Also, if you could help me out, if you could subscribe to the channel and share this with someone else that could use it, I'd much appreciate it. So let me jump in. The name of the article is Silence is the Hardest Drug to Quit and the Best One a Man Ever Picks Up. There's a sound running underneath your life right now, and you stopped hearing it a long time ago. The podcast in your ear on the drive, the TV you leave on in the empty room, the phone that's face down and on silent and still pulling at you anyway because you know there's something on it you haven't checked yet. You didn't decide to fill every quiet minute, you just did, one input at a time, until the quiet was gone and you never noticed it left. So here's the question, and I want you to actually answer it. When was the last time it was quiet? Not no music quiet, not radio off quiet, actually quiet, no input, nobody talking, no phone in reach, just you and the inside of your own head. For most men, the honest answer is, I can't remember. And that's not a small thing. That's a man-sized problem nobody is treating because nobody has a name for it yet. The drug we don't call a drug. Writing this, I'm 11 years into my own recovery, and I've spent enough time around the anatomy of addiction to know its shape when I see it wearing a different coat. So let me say this very plainly. Noise is a drug. Silence is the withdrawal. Watch yourself the next time it gets quiet. The first 3 minutes feels uncomfortable. By 10 minutes, something in you is climbing the walls, looking for the exit, and you reach for whatever's closest to you. The phone, usually. Sometimes, for some, an actual drink. And here's what matters. It isn't the phone and it isn't the drink. The object never matters. What matters is that you can't sit alone in your own head without input, so you grab whatever's nearest to make sure you don't have to. The Big Book has a phrase for what a substance offers a man. It says it offers ease and comfort. It takes the edge off whatever he doesn't want to feel. Constant noise does the job. It takes the edge off being alone with yourself, and it works the way every escape works. It works right up until it doesn't. And then one day you look up and it's cost you something you never agreed to pay. And here's the part that makes it harder to spot than in a bottle or a pill. Nobody worries about you. Nobody pulls you aside, and it's because you have your earbuds in. A man can run from himself his whole life with a podcast and another podcast, and people around him will call him busy or driven or just a guy who likes to stay informed. The drug that nobody questions is the hardest one to put down because the world keeps handing it back to you and telling you that it's good for you. What you're actually running from. Here's what nobody tells you about silence. The reason it's so hard at first isn't that it's boring, it's that it's loud. Take the headphones off, leave the phone in the other room, and what shows up is everything you've been outrunning for as long as you've been running. The conversation you should have had 8 months ago and keep not having. The sentence your father said to you when you were 11, the one you've never repeated out loud, but could quote word for word right now. The grief you keep postponing because there's never a good time for it. None of it's new. It's been sitting there the whole time, waiting for the noise to drop low enough that you'd finally have to look. Silence is a room with no exits, and your whole life is there with you. Of course, you won't sit in it. Of course, you reach for the podcast, but the podcast is also the reason you never quite become the man you were meant to be, because the work was waiting in the room you keep refusing to enter. And the longer you've been running, the louder the room gets when you finally walk into it, which is exactly why most men turn around at the door. They mistake the volume for danger, but the volume isn't danger. It's just everything you postponed, all arriving at once because you finally stopped moving along enough for it to catch up. It feels like the silence is doing something to you. It isn't. It's just the first time in years that nothing is doing anything to you, and a man who has never felt that doesn't know what to call it. So he calls it unbearable and reaches for his phone. What silence actually does, what I've learned to be so powerful. I've sat in enough silence with enough men to tell you what's on the other side of the discomfort. So you know it's coming, and you don't quit at the worst possible moment. The first few minutes are bad. I'm not going to soften that. Your mind throws everything at you and is trying to get you up and moving, and you have to let it. You just don't get up. You just don't escape. You don't quit doing it because you're never going to do it perfectly, by the way. I've been doing this for over 10 years, as I mentioned, and I still feel like I'm wasting time when I'm doing it, that I could be doing so many other things. I had the performance mindset, being a coach for many years, an athlete, and it's been a challenge. But once I've been able to start doing this and doing it on a consistent basis, it's life-changing. All right, the next 10 minutes get quieter. The pile of things you were running from starts to sort itself out without you forcing it, and you stop making new noise and start seeing what was really there. Why you've been short with your wife all week. what you actually want to do about your job, underneath all the reasons you've told yourself you can't. You weren't avoiding those answers because they were hidden. You were avoiding them because you never gave the quiet long enough to hand them to you. And somewhere around 30 minutes, if you make it that far, something else shows up in the room. Call it whatever you're comfortable calling it. Quiet attention, presence, something larger than your own head holding the weight alongside you instead of leaving you to carry it alone. You can use the word God for that, or you don't have to. It could be higher power, it could be something else. But whatever it is, it's the thing your nervous system has been begging for. It's the thing no podcast has ever delivered, and the thing you're exhausted from not having. So let me give you some solutions to this and how to get started. How to get started, because don't do everything at once. Start with one thing. Because if we try to do everything at once, and maybe you've experienced this in your life, we try to implement massive amounts of change, what happens? Well, for me, I've gotten overwhelmed when I've done that. I've tried to do too many things at once, and then I quit. I quit because it's just too much. I think to myself, why even bother? I'm never going to be able to achieve this. So I've learned that starting with one thing right now, what's one action you can take right now that's simple, that will get you going? Once you get a pattern started, a pattern of new behavior, it takes 21 days to start a new behavior, new way in which to live, things start changing and falling into place. So here's what I want to offer you. Where to start? You're not going to sit in 30 minutes of silence tomorrow. And I don't want you to even try it because you'll fail and decide the whole thing isn't for you. So start small and pick one of these and leave the other two for now. There's 3 total. Park the car and don't go in yet. When you pull in from work, don't go inside. Sit in your driveway for 3 minutes, phone down in the cup holder, no music, no calling anybody back. Don't try to think about anything. Just sit there. The house is right there. You can go in whenever you want. But for 3 minutes, you don't. Think about this too. When you get home, if you have people in the house with you, sometimes it's hard where you're moving from one space to another, where you've got one environment where you're this way in that environment, and then you've got to switch, take off one hat and put on another one. So being able to make that transition can be challenging at times. And I know for myself, coming home, being a high energy, high performing type of person, that coming home, I would be still thinking about work for quite a bit of time. So I want to offer you this one because of experience myself, that when sitting and decompressing outside where it's quiet, inside the car is quiet with no radio on, it is really, really useful. Okay, so move on to walk without earbuds. Once this week for 20 minutes. Around the block or up the trail, wherever you go, leave the phone or pocket it, but don't swap it for something else. Let your head do whatever it does. You might be surprised what it sorts out once you stop drowning in it. Last one. The first 3 minutes awake. Before the phone, before the news, before the email, 3 minutes eyes open or closed, doesn't matter. Just notice that you woke up. You're here, and the day hasn't grabbed you quite yet. Pick one. Try it for the week. So moving in forward, as I mentioned before, pick one of these 3 things. So whether it's getting up in the morning where just laying in there in bed, maybe your spouse isn't awake yet or your partner isn't awake yet, and you're able just to lie there looking up the ceiling, maybe noticing the window, the sun's coming in, just laying there in silence. I've done that. It's pretty effective in getting my day started. So I've done it on both ends. In the morning waking up, I'll lie there for a few minutes, then get up and do my meditation, start my day, have coffee with the wife, and then start my day out after that with work. So the other way is decompressing when I come home, because I focus on work. I try to be where my feet are at work. And once I get home, I'll sit in the car and decompress. As I mentioned at the top, a big one for me is being out in the woods, out in nature. And these are the 3 things that have worked for me that I wanted to share with you that I hope you'll try. And I'll tell you exactly what's going to show up when you try these things. because it's the same thing for every man who does this. The thing you've been running from is going to walk into the room with you. That's not the sign that it isn't working. That's the sign that it is working. So it's just the opposite of what you might think. Just kind of like the title of this article is kind of a clickbait. So I did this on purpose to get your attention. You're going to want to escape it, but most don't just sit there. The thing you've been running from has been chasing you long enough, and it's faster than you are. You know that by now, I'm sure. Let it catch you for 3 minutes and see what is actually happening and what it actually wants. Because it's almost never what you've told yourself it is. It's almost never as big as the running made it. One last thing I want to share with you. A word of caution before you try any of this, and I mean this. If you're newly sober, weeks or months in, silence can be more than you're ready to carry alone. The noise wasn't only a habit, it was a wall, and it was holding back things that aren't safe to meet by yourself yet. Trauma was never processed, grief that got buried under using, shame that's been waiting years for a quiet enough room to speak in. Early recovery is fragile on purpose, and sitting alone with all of that arriving at once can pull a man toward the exact relief he's trying to quit. So, if you're new, don't do this solo yet. Don't do it with a qualified counselor or therapist, or even with a sponsor. I would say this, that in a limited amount, some sponsors are great. I've got one myself, but they're not typically qualified for that work. I am. So there's that, because I've been trained. So be careful. If you're feeling you're working with a sponsor, you're doing this sitting in the silence, and you're getting some really scary thoughts come up, tell your sponsor this and stop doing it. And then seek out professional help, a counselor or therapist. All right, so if you're new, don't do this alone. Do it with a sponsor. The 3 minutes in the driveway is one thing. The deeper silence can wait until you've got someone in the room with you. So, next week, you can walk away from the church and still walk toward God. So all these things I've shared with you are things that I've done personally that I find to be very effective. It's taking the mixture of things. The silence is really a powerful tool, and one in which I'm this type A type of person. If you follow the Enneagram, Enneagram 8, which is a controlling personality. So in that, I want to control my environment. So when I do this silence, maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you're had the tendency to control all that's around you. So this is a way in which to use that personality type and leverage that, because there's always good traits in whatever thing that can appear to be negative about ourselves, but we can actually leverage those things. I've learned to leverage, still learning. I think I'll always probably practicing this and finding out new things about myself, but the controlling aspect of myself this has helped me with that, the silence. So my friend, please share this. Please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your help. Until next time.